Okay, I mean, of course, Biden would have too, but the point being is that this is just delusional thinking. So, um, in other words, the other thing is these isolationists. I mean, people like Tucker Carlson have kind of gone off the deep end. I mean, they've they've become so critical of the American establishment that they're actually functioning almost as apologists for Putin. I mean, you know, which is going way too far in the other direction. Or, arguing like you were suggesting, well, the Iranians aren't so bad, blah, 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 or can't we make deals with China? Well, yeah, we can make certain kind of deals with China, but in other areas, we have to recognize we have irreconcilable interests. Right? I mean, that's the same thing that we have to understand with Iran. It's not in the interest of anybody, anywhere, except the Iranian regime, to allow the Iranian regime to to develop the capacity to produce nuclear weapons. And to me, this is a perfect example of where we need an airstrike to try to destroy the Iranian nuclear program. And there's the point. You were talking about interventions. There's different kinds of foreign interventions, and most of them have been stupid. Most of our foreign interventions, like in Iraq, was a fiasco. In Afghanistan, after the initial phase where we were relying on the Northern Alliance and providing help to let them defeat the Taliban, most of our foreign policies since that initial phase in the war on terrorism have been an absolute disaster. And because they've involved invading foreign countries and putting boots on the ground and trying to transform other backwards cultures, that doesn't work. We're not good at nation building. We're not going to spread democracy in a country like Afghanistan, where most of the people have medieval values, frankly. That's just not going to happen. So this is just kind of naive, stupid foreign policy, the kind that the neocons and liberal internationalists promote. What we need is very aggressive, but very selective and targeted military strikes against bad actors that don't involve putting American troops on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason why we can't use air assets to destroy, between Israel and the United States, use air assets to destroy the Iranian nuclear program. That should be something that should be obvious. That doesn't involve doesn't necessarily involve regime change in Iran. It doesn't involve invading Iran. It doesn't involve anything. I mean, hopefully, if the Iranian regime is so discredited, that maybe the Iranian people will rise up and overthrow them. I mean, that would be I wouldn't have too much faith in that, because the Iranian regime has a pretty sophisticated repressive apparatus. But nevertheless, one way that totalitarian and authoritarian regimes collapse is when they suffer military defeats. Like look at the Argentine military junta collapsed after the British defeated them in the Falklands War. That's a fairly common thing. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make is there's a middle ground here between like total disengagement with the world, like some of these naive people like Tucker Carlson are pushing, or even maybe Tulsi. I don't know what she's actually pushing, but some of the things she said seem a little bit naive. There's a middle ground between that and like the idiot war hawks like Lindsey Graham and all these kind of people who are constantly pushing for military invasion for spending more money, like in Ukraine and all this kind of stuff. And there's another disaster. I mean, the Ukraine war should never have happened. It happened mainly because the NATO expanded. The U.S. and Western countries kept expanding NATO to the frontiers of Russia. The Russians said all along that this was not going to be. This was a red line. That Ukraine could not be allowed to join NATO. And the U.S. and other countries had promised Gorbachev that we weren't going to expand an anti-Russian military alliance to the Russian frontier if the Soviet Union collapsed and everything. And yet we did. So we violated all those agreements. We intervened in Ukraine and Maidan and with disastrous consequences, because that led to the Russian invasion of Crimea. Again, I'm not absolving the Russians of their responsibility for the invasion of Ukraine. I mean, Putin's a thug, an authoritarian thug. He's an ultra-nationalist. He's a person who he's like what you would expect from a former KGB operative, right? And there's no justification for carrying out some of the kinds of actions that the Russians are taking in Ukraine. But Ukraine has been behaving in the same stupid fashion, and Zelensky's been a complete fool. I mean, when Trump came in just recently, he gave them both an off ramp. They both had an off ramp. They could have ended this goddamn thing. Nobody would have been totally happy because the Ukrainians were not going to recapture all their territory, and Russia wasn't going to be able to get everything they wanted. But both parties would have basically, it would have been a deal that was based on the military stalemate that's existing now, that the Russians are in a slightly improved situation. If the war continues, the Russians are probably going to gain territory, and Ukraine is going to lose more. So you think that Zelensky, if he had the slightest bit of common sense, he would have gone, yeah, let's get this done. Let's do an off ramp. Let's not make ridiculous demands like we demand that the Russians return Crimea. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the hell. I don't know what the hell Zelensky thought he was going to achieve by making those kind of demands. And now both sides have escalated militarily, and so now we're in a mess where the war is heated up instead of cooling down. So that whole thing has gone to hell in a handbasket. And now we've got the mess with the Iran. So anyway, I mean, getting back to the point you were making,